Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quests to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend on the other side, Brett.
Oh, it's so true. The other side of town.
Other side of town, but that is a term of art that we use often in the law to talk about opposing counsel. And today I am so excited that we're not having to talk about Karen Reed just amongst the two of us prosecutors. We get to have one of the best criminal defense attorneys here who's been analyzing the Karen Reed trial play by play for all of you. And now he's on our show to help us make sense of what's going on with the defense. We have Matt Tympanick with Tympanick Law. Hey, Matt, how are you?
Excellent. Thanks for having me on, guys.
So glad to have you. Always good to have a defense attorney around. It's got to be great being a defense attorney. You can just do whatever you want. You don't have to worry about the rules or the law or the Constitution. It's just like, let's go crazy.
What I love about being a criminal defense attorney is I get to practice how I want. I get to treat my employees the way I want. I get to represent the client how I see fit. Because when I was a prosecutor, I remember my supervisor at the time being like, Matt, when your name's on the wall, and she pointed right to the wall where the state attorney was, you can run things however you want. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea. And I think maybe like 3.5 years after she said that, I started my own law firm.
Matt, we've not met for a very long time, but I can tell you I already like you because Brett comes out of the gate throwing shots at you already, and you throw it right back in the nicest way possible. That's how I know you're a good defense attorney.
I was talking about how awesome it would be to be a defense attorney. I know what you're talking about.
That's why I'm cutting off Brett right now.
Yeah, Alice is saying this because she's now a defense attorney. I'm the lone upholder of truth, justice, and the American way over here, but it's okay.
Wow.
Everybody's just abandoning us, going to the defense side. It's
okay,
fine.
Brett, this is not the Brett show because Matt, I bet you just mentioned being a prosecutor before being a criminal defense attorney. And spoiler alert, you guys, you have heard Brett and I rant for a very long time about the craziness surrounding the Karen Reed case when, in fact, it's a very straightforward hit and run case. But we typically are shouting into the void and nobody agrees with us. I'm not saying that Matt agrees with us, but Matt, I've listened to your coverage. I think it's excellent. I think it's analytical and it really delves into both sides. So before we delve into your take on the case, can you give us a little background of your practice of law, how you still practice today, and what led you to doing commentary while still practicing law?
So it's very interesting. So I have been an attorney for over 8 years. I did over 3 years at the state attorney's office as a prosecutor. First half, misdemeanor prosecutor. Second half, felony prosecutor. Done 40 cases when I was there. After I left, I did civil law for about 18 months or so. And I was like, this is not for me. I want to do trials. I want to deal with clients. I don't want to deal with faceless organizations. So I started Tympanick Law in November of 2021. During that time, I started making a connection with a sports law attorney who has a podcast, Conduct Detrimental, which I've been on several times. And he introduced me to a producer at Law and Crime who's looking for people to provide analysis. So I think I started right after the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Abed, Arbery, a couple other cases I handled, Curtis Reeves out of Florida. And I did that for several years while I was kind of building up my practice. And then from there, Court TV called, Live Now from Fox. And I've been doing it for several years. But for Court TV, the biggest thing is when I started talking about the Karen Reed case. So about 18 months ago, I want to say in January, I texted that same producer at Law and Crime. I said, just to let you guys know, you guys got to be ready for this trial. I've never seen the engagement online for a criminal case, potentially ever. It's got the conspiracy. It's got all the moving pieces, a cover up, a defendant who claims that she's a patsy. It's got everything. And the engagement online. So you guys are going to have to pay attention to this. Lo and behold, I, at the time, had still no idea what the case was really all about and how big it would actually grow. It's come to the point where I walk around anywhere and somebody just says to me, "Are you Matt Tympanick?" I was like, yes. It's like, okay, I need to talk to you about the Karen Reed case. And then 10 minutes later, they're like, thank you so much. So I can't even begin to tell you how this case is blown up. I'm originally from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I was born not even 10 miles from where this actually occurred, maybe 12, something like that. So it is like Massachusetts, everybody's kind of connected to everybody. And that's kind of what the theme of the defense has been putting forward.
And you've gotten really the best of it. You had your Twitter account hacked. You've gotten harassed. I mean, just exactly what you expected when you started commenting on legal cases, right?
Oh my God, yeah. Today I actually got a crank phone call for somebody who saw me on Live Now from Fox telling me it's like the guy was slurring and everything, talking about how it's like, you have no idea what you're talking about on the case, and started talking about the Palestinians. And it's just a microcosm of the defense's supporters, like just completely out there. It's like, how do you have the time to come and call my work line, take the time to search me online, get my work line, and then call it and then leave the voicemail? Because I got it while I was actually doing my show earlier. I'm like, what is this? And I actually began to, while I was recording, play it. And some of my subscribers actually heard it at first. And I had to like quickly delete it. I was like, I don't need to run into any kind of two-party consent laws, and nor am I allowing this individual any more attention that they drunkenly thought they would get out of it. So you never know what the day's going to hold for you when you're analyzing the Karen Reed case.
Absolutely. And you say you're practicing. Well, now that we're in trial number 2, and these are long trials, those of us who practice trials know that a trial over a week is relatively long. When we're talking about like more than a month-long trial twice over, this is incredibly long. So how are you able to balance practicing? Are you still practicing during this case? And of what's your schedule in a day? I'm sure people would love to hear that.
What I do is I have my assist. So I kind of go back and forth. If I got stuff going on, I usually try to catch it in the car. I try to watch the recap. I have YouTube Premium so I can rewind it and see what it is, because I don't have the time to spend 6 to 8 hours streaming, talking over guests and talking over testimony. I have real clients who demand my attention. So while I'm doing that, I'm like, I think for the Dr. Rensler, my assistant, who's exceptional, was watching the testimony, taking notes for me. And then I go back and watch it and see if she missed anything. It's like, okay, this is important. But there are also times when I'm like, okay, I don't have to be in court today. Well, I guess I'll kind of live tweet it for a couple hours just to be able to get a better idea. Because one of the biggest things I've realized is people are afraid that it's like nobody's actually saying anything different. Like in this case, I can count on, when I first started commenting on this case, on one hand, the number of defense attorneys who were actually being like, hey, no, let's consider the evidence. Let's talk about, and not going down the conspiracy rabbit hole, because it's too easy for people. Because I remember, I can tell you a story. A high profile celebrity actually called me up and was like, how do you deal with the harassment on a daily basis? And I was like, I said one innocuous thing today, and I was turtled, if it were, which is like slang for I was attacked repeatedly for just saying the slightest negative thing about the defense. And I said, as long as you are arguing what you know to be the facts and the evidence, you can't go wrong. It goes with the territory. You're going to try to say something that a bunch of people online refuse to hear. They're going to try to discredit you. They're going to try to attack you. They're going to try to hack your Twitter and post pornography on it during the defense's case. They're going to do whatever. You just got to literally stay the course and just continue to argue the facts and the evidence.
So everyone's heard our opinions on this case. We've been doing updates every couple weeks. talking about the strengths, weaknesses of the various sides' cases. In particular, the defense case. The defense is now, as we record this, it's completed their case. They have rested. The closing arguments are tomorrow. We could have a verdict in this case. I mean, I guess theoretically we could have a verdict in this case tomorrow afternoon, probably more like next week. But as a defense attorney and as someone who was a prosecutor, what is your opinion on the defense case in particular? Guys, we want to talk about one of our favorite podcasts, Silver Linings Handbook. And you know we love it because we've been on it several times. Jason Blair is the host, and he is one of the best interviewers in the business. And he's not just talking to flashy people and podcasters and those sorts of boring types like Alice and I. He's talking to people who are really involved in these cases, like Kimberly Loring. We covered the case of Ashley Loring, heavy runner, a 20-year-old Native woman who went missing near Browning, Montana. And Jason gave Kimberly the opportunity to give her sister a voice and call on those responsible for her disappearance to bring her home. And that's the kind of thing you're going to hear on Jason's podcast. Silver Linings Handbook has the best interviews, the best conversations, and always gets to the heart of what is most important in true crime, and that is the victims and the people seeking justice.
It's true. This podcast has something for everyone. The areas that Jason focuses on have included well-being, mental health, law and criminal justice system, true crime, religion, society, truly anything that is interesting that can inspire, he covers. And what we feel makes the podcast different is that it's really not scripted at all. Jason uses the same natural curiosity you would have sitting in the living room or around a campfire with a new and exciting person you had just met. Jason is a former journalist who worked at the New York Times, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, and other newspapers. You'll quickly see how this weekly podcast of interesting people in interesting walks of life, that these are conversations that inspire and interesting conversations with interesting people. You've got to listen today. Brett and I do all the time. So subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto prices. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket.
Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
I think they didn't really realize what their best defense was until it was too late. When you think of the first trial, it was just this convoluted conspiracy cover-up that was never really there. But some of the witnesses kind of played into their hands, so a jury was like, maybe it was possible. In the end, I think in the first trial, no matter what was presented, that case was never going to end with anything but a mistrial, because I think 3 of the jurors, no matter what was presented, were never going to vote to convict the defendant. So when you think of this case now, the defense's case is, oh crap, now they have the black box data from the vehicle that they didn't have the first time. They actually have a reconstructionist who knows what they're talking about and actually did a reconstructionist. And worst of all, our client is on video recordings giving the jury all pieces of evidence, including a conversation, a back and forth she had with her own attorney, which would normally be privileged, but not for the fact that she didn't know she's the holder of the privilege. And by disclosing that, she waived that privilege. So the defenses had to go from there was no collision to they can't prove to you there was a collision. And with Dr. Rensler's testimony, he did, like, watching the reconstruction from Dr. Wolf, I'm like, I had to watch it like 3-4 times. I'm like, are they just making the Commonwealth's case for them? I think this is a better reconstruction than the Commonwealth had. And then jury's like,
it was.
Thank you. We appreciate
I truly
that.
thought it was the prosecution's case when I turned on the TV.
And I'm like, this is 18 miles an hour and it's shattered. So now do it at 24 miles an hour. And they're like, I was like, okay, what about the embedded piece of the taillight in his clothing? Well, if there's no collision, everything else doesn't matter. And it's like, really? That's what you're going with? And if you look at the defense team during Dr. Wolf, when they're playing the video of the taillight, they're all like, this is the worst testimony anybody's ever given in a defense case. ARCA might as well build a Commonwealth for this because it's helping them 1,000 times more than it's helping us.
Okay, Matt, I totally agree with you. It's a horrible witness for the defense. So why? Why did the defense call him? Because the defense was in charge. They didn't have to call him, and we didn't have to see this video from the defense's direct of this witness. So why, as a defense attorney, did they call ARCA?
I don't know if David and Alan Jackson are really in charge anymore. I can tell you the attorneys are in charge of trial strategy, but I don't know how, looking at the reaction of them at the defense table while this is being played, I don't know if it was their call to introduce this. I said on numerous occasions, the best defense for them was no defense.
Yeah, basically, they should have just rested.
Exactly.
They didn't prove it.
Enough, and we're not going to call anybody. And we're going to go right to closing arguments. There's no rebuttal, nothing. And the jury's like, wow, they're pretty much saying that they got nothing and they didn't even put on anything. That's stronger than putting on a defense, because watching this video in slow motion at a 24-mile-an-hour impact is like, this is almost precisely, look at what the taillight looks like. It looks exactly how it was and found in the photographs. It's like, did you guys not think that this would actually help the other side? Or are you not no longer pulling the string? Because I don't see, if I was the defense attorney in this case, I'd be like, no way, no how are we playing this video. The Commonwealth's reconstruction, for how expensive it was very, I don't know, prehistoric.
Right? It was like the safe one. It's like, I can't rule it out, rather than this is what happened.
Exactly. And this is just like, well, there you go. If you didn't miss, this is how it actually happened. It answers the question, how did the embedded piece of the taillight get into Officer O'Keefe's sleeve? And it's like showing they have the arm out and everything. And Jerry's like, wow, you guys are making this really easy for us.
Prove that an arm can shatter a taillight. Prove that the taillight would explode outward. Prove, it's
everything. If he weren't suspended, he would fall back and hit his head and get the concussion that causes the black eyes, exactly as the doctor said. But so you, and I want you to spell it out for people, but you said it may not be up to Alan Jackson and the defense team. I believe you're talking about Karen Reed. So one of the other things that is just, I think, for the defense this second time around are her words, her own words in all these nationwide interviews that they get to play the prosecution's case in chief, because of course she's the party opponent. So can you talk a little bit about, like, as a defense attorney, you said you like working with clients, but there's client management. Would you have let her give these interviews, and what you do when you have a client who is maybe disregarding your legal advice?
So here's the conundrum for Alan Jackson. This defense, I think it was reported for the first trial, I think was like $5 million when it was all said and done. To do the retrial, pretty similar to cost that. And Karen Reed doesn't have that money to be able to do that. Everything she had, everything her dad had, she's already used up. And they're relying on donations. So if you're Alan Jackson, what makes more sense? If you're going to get paid for this retrial, that's 8 weeks that you can't make money for other clients because you're in Dedham, Massachusetts, trying this case, and Max, A Body in the Snow documentary, calls like, hey, we'll send a camera crew with you and we'll pay you X dollars. And you're a defense attorney, like, I need to get paid. And if she doesn't get paid, I won't get paid. And but at the same time, it's like, if she does these, it's a double-edged sword. She does these interviews, and if she doesn't get acquitted, be damn sure that this is going to be front and center of the retrial. And that's exactly what it was. She plugged so many holes for the Commonwealth with her own words. And you're just like, you didn't have to say any of this stuff. It's like, did somebody not sit next to you and be like, don't say this, don't answer this? And I don't know how many times, I remember I was on Court TV about a month ago, and she was outside the courtroom, and she was asked, did you hit John O'Keefe? And instead of saying just simply no, she goes, we all know who did this. And it was like a pause, and Alan Jackson realized immediately that that could be construed as an admission by refusal to deny. And he's like, no more questions. It wasn't her. And it's just like, I don't get it. It's like, I tell every one of my clients, until I've pled you or until you've been acquitted, you don't say anything to anyone but me. Anybody is a potential witness. Your mother, your father, your sister, your former roommate, they all can be witnesses. And if they are subpoenaed, they have to testify against you. The worst witness in any criminal case will always be yourself. And Karen Reed, unfortunately, did not get that memo.
Let me ask you this, because this is a question I've had for a while, and I'm glad to have a defense attorney here to answer this question. So the 227 search that was used to accuse Jim McCabe of being involved in this murder, that was the centerpiece of the first trial. In this trial, the defense didn't even contest it. They didn't call the expert who supposedly found it, did not allow him to be crossed, I think for obvious reasons, because given the science and the data that we heard from the Commonwealth, it would have been a disaster. But nevertheless, completely debunked, gone. When you have a defendant and you have a case like this, and you have the opportunity to make sort of a third-party culpability argument, obviously there is that danger that you're going to implicate someone who's innocent. And I think in Jim McCabe's case, I mean, her whole life, her children's lives, her husband's life, her friends' lives, I mean, they have been just made a living hell over the last 3 years. How do you balance your constitutional obligation to provide a vigorous defense for your client against the sort of ethical questions of when you accuse someone like Jim McCabe of being involved in something like this?
When I think of this whole third-party culprit, I think back to the old show, The Practice, which was on the ABC about 25 years ago. And they had a defense strategy called Plan B, where Plan A was reasonable doubt. Plan B is you accuse somebody else. So when you're in a kind of Plan B third-party culprit situation, you're only making arguments that you believe you have a good faith basis to believe this is possible, not just throwing anything against the wall and seeing what sticks. The problem with basically accusing Jen McCabe and Brian Higgins and Brian Albert was there was nothing to support it. It's just strange actions, just kind of conspiracy, conjecture, anything that was just a forced doubt and speculative doubt. I've said since the beginning of the first trial that the best avenue was to attack the investigation, to go with essentially a Bowden defense, because it's not something outlandish. It's something that everybody agrees with. It's not going to be a hard sell to convince the jury there were issues with the investigation. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best that it could be. But with the Bowden instruction, it gives the jury to be like, well, we thought the investigation was severely flawed, and it is grounds for reasonable doubt. So I think we have our reasonable doubt right here. But the defense didn't go with that angle until it seemed like very recently. They were still trying to lay that foundation. So when you think about having a good faith and ethical basis to it, you need to know that it's at least remotely possible. And I don't think they ever did. I think that they went off conspiracies on the internet from bloggers and content creators and basically built a defense to satisfy them. It's like, oh, why don't you do this? And it's like, you're just a strange action and you're just calling it a conspiracy. It was never the best defense strategy. And those individuals are potentially permanently scarred from this case, which is really unfortunate. And I can't even express my remorse that they had to go through that, because nobody should be falsely accused of being part of a crime that they had no part whatsoever in.
Yeah, I mean, so this case in particular has really seen this like wellspring of legal commentators. I mean, we're commenting on it, but we're really talking about people who are focusing on this conspiracy theory, on the defense. And it seems like it seems more so throughout the defense's case in the second trial that they're responding to these online media personalities rather than what's happening in court. Can you talk a little bit about that when you are practicing, how much you listen to the noise that's out there, and whether you think that is happening in this case, that they're actually listening to the online kind of hysteria and what that's doing to their case, whether it's effective?
So about 3 years ago, I had a 2-week civil trial that was actually on Law and Crime Network. So I was a commentator, and then I took like a leave of absence to be able to try this major case that was featured on there. And at the end of the day, I would go and I would see the comments and see the analysis from my colleagues and everything. And at the end of the day, you need to remember, it's like, you know your case better than anyone. They're just commenting on what they see. So you got to ignore the noise. Being from Massachusetts, being a Patriots fan, grew up with Bill Belichick as my head coach. Everybody outside the room, you have to ignore what they are saying. Unless it's your assistant or your co-counsel. Because during that trial, I had my mom trying to give me notes. I had my friends who had no idea about the case. And they're like, you should do this. You should ask that. And it's like, you have to know what your actual case is about. And unfortunately for the defense, in this trial, they had lost sight of what their actual best defense actually was. They stopped trying to acquit Karen Read and tried to more satisfy the online urge to prove this conspiracy existed. That was more important than actually getting the defendant acquitted, was just simply proving that, oh, these people are part of it. And all these people who spent hundreds of hours listening to our podcasts and streams about this conspiracy, as we show 52 things that are misinformation, make them feel vindicated, not make them feel like a fool. And that's the unfortunate reality with this case. Too many people were basically duped into thinking this conspiracy was real just simply because some blogger looking for attention told them it was.
And I guess, the thing that's strange to me, I'm obviously on Twitter a lot and engage with these folks a lot and hear their opinions. And there is a subset of just whack job lunatics on Twitter who are 100% convinced that this is a massive conspiracy. Higgins has flipped every day this year at some point. The FBI is coming. They're just waiting for the case to be over. The SWAT team will be dropping in any minute. I mean, there are those people. And, as far as like whipping up support and donations for testing or whatever, or so Karen can have really nice dinners and stay in the waterfront or whatever, they're great and helpful. But there are a lot of people on there who are much more sort of normal and just say, look, I don't see it. There's too much reasonable doubt. This doesn't seem like a car accident to me. It doesn't seem like a strike. And I guess the thing I don't understand is if you're the defense attorney, and these are smart guys, they know what they're doing, and you're looking at what your supporters are saying, there is a wing of support that's making a really good argument. The fact of the matter is, I am 100% convinced that Karen Read struck this man and he ended up dying because he hit his head on the frozen ground. 100% convinced, no doubt. But this is a weird accident. She didn't hit him head on. She did hit him at an angle. It did cause him to spin around. He didn't get the full force of the vehicle, which means the injuries aren't what you might expect. And there's all sorts of good arguments there. And I just don't understand. And I really believed that after the first trial, and we said this, they would leave this conspiracy behind. And Alan Jackson gets up for his opening, and it seems like they're going to leave it behind. He says there was no collision, there was no collision, there's no collision. And I just thought that's what they're going to do. And yet they just keep coming back to it. They bring the dog bite expert back, and they're making these sort of vague allegations against Jim McCabe because they can't even really build the conspiracy like they could the first time. And I just don't get it. And I don't really have a question at the end of this. I'm more ranting, but I just don't understand.
I'll frame it into a question.
Fix it for me, Alice.
It seems like the defense came with the exact same playbook. Like when I prep for a trial, I do have outlines. I can pull out my outlines, but you are supposed to, prep for the new trial. And obviously there's a new prosecutor. The Commonwealth changed its strategy. There was better evidence, but really the bulk of the evidence is the same. But it seemed like they showed up to the wrong party and read the old script. Why did that happen? Like, surely they could catch on, but that's what it seems like is happening. Is that what's happening? And why is it happening?
I think that they brought the same playbook because they thought it's like, well, we got obviously the courts didn't agree, but we got the murder charge dismissed and we got the leaving the scene of the accident involving death acquitted as well. So it's like, what we need to do is just tighten it up. It's like, all right, where's the whole case? It's the collision. So what I think they're doing, and because in the first trial, they tried to make the conspiracy like so real that the jury is like, all right, you have to believe it exists. Now they're almost doing it like a documentary where they're like leaving these little tidbits and Easter eggs and allowing the jury to come to the conclusion on their own, because saying it out loud is so absurd, and trying to make that argument, it's like you have nothing. But in this age of where true crime is huge, you might get jurors who are like, well, what about this? Like some of the questions on Twitter I have seen of like people claiming reasonable doubt. It's like, this exists, and what about this? And it's just, no, that's a forced doubt. I actually did a video explaining what reasonable doubt is, a very simple definition. And people just still think anything. It's like, well, why didn't Brian Albert come out of his house? Reasonable doubt, case over. And it's just like, that's not how it works. So when you think of the defense's case, there is no collision. Oh, no collision. Okay, good. Bowden evidence, good. All right, 227. Oh, God, here we go again. No, thankfully that was abandoned. But that was also probably one of their most damning pieces of evidence of a possible conspiracy. And with that out and not being contested, they really can't pin Jen McCabe as part of it. So now it's just, okay, did Brian Higgins just do this on his own? Like beat John O'Keefe in the basement in front of all these people and then threw him on the lawn? No, of course not. They're trying to get the jury to gaslight themselves into thinking that everything they presented is a lie. That's what they're hoping, that with that Bowden instruction, that no matter what mountain of evidence there is against the defendant, that the jury's gonna be like, we can't trust any of it. Trooper Michael Proctor, Brian Higgins, Brian Albert, they're all in on this. Yuri Buchanan. And it's just like, why don't you guys just make a sensible defense based upon the investigation in it? Why did you have to bring all these people into this, knowing they had no part of it? And it just feels almost too desperate. I remember I was a judge, a retired judge, was like arguing with me one day and about it. And it's just like, it's very simple. When you're doing a criminal case, find one defense and stick with it. Because if you start changing it and it keeps evolving, a jury's going to pick up on that. And then they're thinking, if you don't know what your theory of the case is, maybe it's the Commonwealth here is actually telling us the truth, and you're trying to spin whatever you can.
So when you say that they're leaving these breadcrumbs for this conspiracy and they're not saying it out loud because they think it's too ridiculous. So my sense was that because the jury is not supposed to be watching the news and they're not listening to the media, that based on the defense's kind of whack-a-mole approach to laying out the conspiracy, if I were on the jury and knew nothing about this case, I would have no idea what's going on. But that's interesting that, you know, we have kind of different takes on it. Do you think the jury is following the conspiracy they're trying to lay down? I mean, they're supposed to not have heard about this case or not be following it in real time on media. But I'm just curious if you think it's a coherent theory they're even putting forward. That's why I find their defense kind of so scattershot.
So one of the most important things when you're doing a criminal trial is in jury selection. Sans souci the art of war. Every battle is won before it is ever fought. In a criminal case, that's jury selection. So when I am about to try a case, I am picking, well, in Florida, we pick 6 jurors, I think 7 for an alternate. Each one of those jurors are on the jury for a reason, depending on the case. What are the facts and circumstances? What are their background? What do they watch? Do they watch Fox News? Are they reading the New York Times? Are they watching a bunch of true crime podcasts and listening to them, watching true crime documentaries? Because when you're trying to present your case, you need to be able to present it to 12 people. It's not intended for people online and content creators. You were made it for 12 people. That is what it is. And you need your defense when you are concocting it from jury selection in opening to be able to weave a cohesive story throughout. And unfortunately, it's just changed so many times that they're just like, all right, this didn't work. Let's try this. This didn't work, as opposed to the Commonwealth's case. Because remember with ADA Lowley, he did a commendable job, but it was all over the place the first trial. It wasn't they showed enough evidence for a pedestrian strike, but it wasn't compelling. They didn't have the black box. They didn't have the digital evidence from John O'Keefe's phone. So Hank Brennan's been able to tell a cohesive story from the moment he stepped up for opening statements till now. While the defense is just, let's throw anything against the wall, watch it, see what people think on Vinnie Politan, about what people are thinking about our defense, and go from there. Because it just changes on a daily basis. And I think the jury's just going to get to the point where, like, okay, you guys really don't have anything, right? Because I think I've heard if they were paying attention, they'll know that they promised the 227, well, proven it occurred. That was debunked. They said somebody would place John O'Keefe in the residence. That never happened. If they were paying attention during that, obviously what attorneys say in openings is not evidence as well as closings, but it would give an idea. It's like, all right, you guys overpromise and underdelivered.
The problem with all this, and my concern, and I still think it's true, that the case was decided, as you said, the moment they picked the last juror. That, like, this was completely about jury selection. The Commonwealth was going to prove its case. But if there's an FKR on that jury, it's going to hang. I mean, yes. I just don't think it matters how much evidence they presented. So I guess when I ask you a 2-part question, number one, I think I know the answer to this question. Do you think the Commonwealth proved its case? And number two, if this jury hangs, do you think they try it again?
All right. So this is something I've been considering for a long time about it. For first, they did prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt for the charges. That being said, I still think it's an uphill battle to get murder 2 from the jury. I think that they're going to hear, for me, and this is something that I've talked about pretty extensively, the two kind of consciousness of guilt, in addition to all the recordings, was the angry voicemails. So if she intended to commit grievous bodily harm, the jury's be like, so if she knew she hit something or she thought she hit him, she starts calling him and leaving all those voicemails to cover her tracks. But, and also the more important, like the bigger issue that I wanted answered, which you can only get so much, is when she backs up into John O'Keefe's vehicle at like 5:07 a.m. I lived in the Commonwealth for 25 years, and everybody knows you have to turn that steering wheel in the stove so much earlier because your tires can so easily spin out. When you watch that video, she backs right up into the car, into the exact place where the taillight is cracked. For me, that's how I knew. I think she knew she hit something and that was intended to actually cover her tracks. So it brings me to the questions like, if they hang, will they retry? I think it depends. I think if they hang between murder and manslaughter, they're going to just take the manslaughter, take the leaving the scene of the accident, and move on. They're just going to be like, we don't need to retry murder. We don't need to do this circus again. Because a motor vehicle manslaughter in the Commonwealth is a minimum mandatory 5 years, punishable by up to 20. And I think Judge Canonen would probably give 10 to 15 years is what I would guess for this case. And the Commonwealth would be like, I think we're good with that. We don't need this circus anymore. Because then if she's convicted, this will be appealed to the end of time. And every content creator and every supporter will be like, we're going to take this to the Supreme Court. Well, we're going to take this now to The Hague. And then it's, all right, we're going to take this to God and we're going to allow him to be the final. Like, okay, you guys are never going to accept anything. So that's okay. But if the defendant is in handcuffs taken away, I think however long she spends in jail or prison will be more than enough for the victims' families. Because there used to be a time I thought if she is convicted, her worst sin was actually killing John O'Keefe. I've come to the realization that it's actually trying to gaslight the world into thinking it was anybody but her.
And ruining so many
100%.
people's lives and having absolutely no remorse for John O'Keefe, his family, you know, his adopted daughter and son, and then all of these other people who used to be her friends, or at least in her friend circle, ruining their lives.
She's a serial offender.
I mean, it is
She
just
killed one
horrendous.
person and
Ruined a lot of lives.
Well, she said during one of the documentaries, it's either going to be me or you, Jen McKay. One of us is going down.
She literally played out her plan. You're right. Exactly. And they played it at the very beginning of trial. And I thought that was incredibly telling. And here's the thing. Karen Reed, when she speaks, she can't help but tell the truth. That's what's so damning about all the things she's saying. She can only lie so much, but when she's telling it, she tells you everything that needs to happen. She said, I hit him. She said she backed into him and sideswiped him. It wasn't, a head-on collision. She tells you everything that is a question mark for the defense.
I mean,
she laid it out.
She's
She
just
laid it out
awful.
right there. So, okay, I have another question for you then. A lot of people claim to either be defense attorneys or defense adjacent people, and they tout their experience, and they all say, at least online, that they 100% believe in the conspiracy theory, right? Do you think they actually believe it? After this trial, after both trials, I don't know. Maybe I have too much faith in humanity. Do you think they really believe in the conspiracy theory? And if not, how the heck do you get online and say things that are just so wildly untrue when you know it's damaging real people's lives?
So what I can tell you is this, because it's something I've dealt with for the last 18 months or so. The amount of people who have been like, why are you destroying your brand? I'm like, my brand? My brand is honesty and integrity. My brand is not gaslighting and conjecture. So when you think of some of these defense attorneys, when you think of the content creators, the non-attorneys, most of them believe it. Some of them I know don't. And they're too afraid to actually, I know a huge crime podcast, which I was expecting to cover this extensively, didn't say a word on this case because I think they knew either way they would lose. Either they tell the truth and they lose their subscribers, or they lie and they lose their integrity. And I think that that's kind of too often. A lot of these attorneys are ones who don't practice criminal law, who've never tried a criminal case. There's one who has like 500,000 subscribers and he holds himself up to be a criminal attorney when he's just really a civil attorney with his father. And like they're talking and it's like they're too afraid to lose that relevance. They think that if they don't tell people what they want to hear, that people are just going to go find somebody who will. And that's a perfectly valid concern. But that's not what analyzing cases is about. It's you need to be prepared to tell people what they don't want to hear. I've been doing this for almost 4 years. And what I know is 40% of people are going to agree with you, 40% are going to disagree with you, and 20% are going to be swayed one way or another. And that's just how it is. Sometimes I think some of these people, no matter what I will say, it'll be 10 years from now. And I just know this. And I'll be talking about some random case and people are like, well, you thought Karen Reed was guilty, so I can't believe you. And it's like, what happened? What did they tell you that was so compelling? And it wasn't they presented anything compelling. It's people were told what they wanted to hear. And it's just like, this is what I believe. And since he's telling me that, it has to be the truth. He's smarter than I. He's a lawyer. He's got to be telling the truth.
It's just amazing to me that people don't. Karen Reed's going to be hopefully over in a week. And then people are going to move on. And Turtle Boy is going to go back to being irrelevant. And the FKRs are going to go back to wearing blue. And nobody's going to care. And the way they acted throughout this, personally, okay, you got like a temporary bump from these people. But they're going to move on. They always do. This happens in every single case. And you see people in all these high-profile cases blow themselves up because it gets them a temporary bump. And then those people go away and they move on to the next thing. And these creators are left behind. And now they have to chase even more conspiracies. And I just don't get it. I don't understand. I understand that this is a business. And for a lot of people, it is their main source of income. And I totally get that. I mean, that's a pressure to keep those numbers up, right? But the short-sightedness of it all, it blows my mind, particularly for attorneys, because I don't know, maybe I'm naive or idealistic or something, but we all take oaths and we love to talk about the truth and the Constitution and always seeking justice and seeking right and all this other stuff. And then they put a microphone in front of them and a camera on them, and all of a sudden they just lose their minds.
It's definitely, this whole case has been a microcosm of what's been going on. The truth is now a matter of opinion. And that's what we're seeing here in this case is it's like, okay, let me list out the scientific evidence. But it's like, oh, well, that crime scene, corrupt Michael Proctor. It's like, are you actually considering the evidence, or you've made the determination that no matter what is presented? I believe some of these FKR people, they could have had a video of the incident happening with a signed confession and 25 witnesses. And they'd say, it's a deep fake. She was coerced and all those people are in on it.
And by the way, they have that. They have Arcos.
Yeah, they pretty much do have her.
And they have her words on Dateline, right? Like you're right. They have that.
And it just doesn't matter to them. And it's just stunning. And the only way what I can do is I'm like, okay, if somebody wants to have a rational conversation, response, ask rational question, I'll respond. But the amount of people I've had to block over the last year and a half that are just, they're so in your face about everything. They are so ardent. They are so blinded. And a part of me thinks they're just so afraid that they are going to be like, they're not going to be part of this club anymore, that they'll go along with whatever's said, ignoring all common sense, ignoring all logic, what the physical, digital, and forensic evidence is saying. And it's just like, that's not how criminal cases are won and lost. It doesn't occur online. It is won and lost by facts. Facts win cases in courtrooms.
There's certainly always been an interest in true crime. We are all part of that as well. But this goes beyond just an interest in true crime. This has become like a religion in some ways, like a calling that is frenzy, that has called action. People, like you said, are wearing different colors and they're showing up at the courthouses with their children. What do you think about Karen Reed specifically has caused this to go outside the regular realms of true crime interest into, this is no longer interest, right? This is a frenzy. And you're right. I think another frenzy will come along. But what about Karen Reed struck this chord at this time?
I think it was kind of the environment we're in as a country. People don't believe anything that they hear. Everything that people subscribe to the belief that believe only half of what you see and none of what you hear. And they watch, like, I have a friend of mine who watched Body in the Snow and texted me randomly. He's like, hey, were you like the Karen Reed case? That's the one you've been talking about to me extensively. Yeah. And it's just like, and the review in the documentary is presented in such a way that it's like, that your only conclusion would be that it was a conspiracy. It's like, okay, did you know this? No. Did you know that? No. And he's like, oh, now I don't like this as much because I felt like I was given a one-sided equation. And I think that's what she's been doing this whole time, is you think about what would actually get her acquitted. And it's like the whole purpose of this whole thing was to poison the jury pool, was to basically make it to a point where there's nobody who be on this jury who doesn't know about this case. The entire town of Canton is completely divided on this issue, potentially forever. Like, you cannot, in the Commonwealth, you cannot be somebody and not have an opinion on the case. It just doesn't work that way. And I can tell you, I have family members who are FKRs. My 2 cousins that are ardent supporters of them. I have my parents were kind of like, oh, they're reasonable doubt, or she should have never been charged with that. And it's like, what the reach this lady has gotten to for one criminal case. I'm like, everyone, she's charged with murder. This isn't some scandal. This is not some sex scandal. She has been charged with murder of a police officer, and at second degree, where she's punishable by life. So let's act like she's not a celebrity. And unfortunately, people see her as this symbol of police corruption in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That she is, if it can happen to her, it can happen to us. And it's like, no, she just wants you to think that. She's there because there's strong, compelling evidence that she struck John O'Keefe on purpose. That's why she's there. Not because she's a patsy, but because all the evidence points in one direction. And unfortunately, people don't understand that, don't believe that. And no matter what you present to them, they'll never agree to it.
So all that being said, and I think that was brilliantly said, as we sort of wrap this up, what's going to happen?
I think they hang on murder 2 and she's convicted of the lessers. I think hearing David Yannetti talk about the lessers more poignantly this time around, I don't know if the defendant is, but I think they're bracing for a conviction for some kind of motor vehicle manslaughter, some kind of lesser. I just think that there's just too strong of evidence to prove a collision. And if there was a collision and Officer O'Keefe died, as David Yannetti told the defendant, she has some culpability.
Okay, so closing arguments are tomorrow. What do you think the prosecution needs to bring in its closing, and what does the defense need to do? Best case scenario.
The Commonwealth needs to bring common sense back to the courtroom. They need to bring logic. They need to bring facts, evidence, and hammer that home. The jury needs to understand that this is not as complicated as it needed to be. The evidence is overwhelming. It's compelling. They have digital forensic as well as the black box data. And the defense's position is to ignore all that, ignore all of the evidence, and accept their belief that they should have investigated Brian Higgins more, that they could have done things differently. It's like, and at the end of the day, when you make that common sense argument and break it down so succinctly, the jury's going to realize this was never that difficult of a case. It was never anything more than a drunk woman who struck her boyfriend. That's what it is. And when you break it down that easily with all of the evidence, it's just not that difficult of a case to understand nor to prove. So from the defense's perspective, they need to kind of argue. They can't really go third-party culprit, but they just want the seeds of they didn't do enough, and hoping that the jury reads that Bowden instruction and takes it to heart. That's their only shot. Dr. Rensler did not dispel the notion that there was a collision. Dr. Wolf's video reconstruction confirmed what the Commonwealth was saying. So they can't really go there. Their only shot is to argue a Bowden instruction and hope the jury agrees.
Well, Matt, we're all going to be watching the closing arguments tomorrow, and I hope I recently said a quick verdict is probably going to be good for the Commonwealth. I don't know that we'll get one tomorrow, but you have a lot of places that you comment on this case. Can you tell people where they can hear you on your legal commenting on this case or any other cases?
So I am on Twitter at Tympanick Law, Instagram the same way. I have my YouTube channel at Tympanick Law, as well as I appear Law and Crime, Court TV, live now from Fox. I'm everywhere and happy to be on with you guys tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We could rant for a very long time, and we'd love to have you back on some other time because it's so refreshing to hear from the other side of the aisle, of course, but to also be able to agree on certain parts of this case that are just kind of indisputable, and to see how a defense attorney would argue this without throwing integrity out the window. So thank you for giving us such clear analysis. Brett, is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, I just want to thank you for coming, and I hope you'll come back. We got a lot of cases we talk about in the future, and we need your perspective.
Absolutely.
Happy to do it. Thanks, guys.
Well, it has been such a treat to get the defense perspective on the Karen Read case. You heard from Matt himself. He has so many outlets where he's commenting on this case and others. Be sure to go check him out. And also good luck with your, law practice. I know this is a lot of work. We all three still practice. I don't know why we do it. It's a lot of fun. We do it for the love of the game. But until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And I'm Matt Tympanick.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I need to pull up ads. Did I take off my shirt? Who are you?
I feel like nobody's backing me up on this, so it's obviously true.
Nobody back him up on this because it did not happen. Okay, hold on. Legal briefs, not to be confused with underwear, because apparently that's where our head is. Only progressive. Okay.
I really want a blacksmith shop. Will they do that? I always wanted to be a blacksmith.
Do you know how to blacksmith?
No. But if I had an anvil and everything else, I could learn. I could figure it out.
This summer, Pluto TV is exploding with thousands of free movies. Summer of Cinema is here. Feel the explosive action all summer long with movies like Gladiator, Mission Impossible, Beverly Hills Cop, Good Burger, and Transformers: Dark of the Moon. Bring the action with you and stream for free from all your favorite devices. Pluto TV. Stream now. Pay never.